So my name is Rob Wilder, and I'm the only thing standing between you and free beer. So I'm in a tough spot here. But I'm right at home here in the Penn Quarter, having started ThinkFoodGroup 18 years ago with my partner, José Andrés. And if I haven't met you around the neighborhood, you probably know the more boisterous José. And we wanted to tell you today a story about how we created and grew our company, but not a lesson on how to grow a company now with 800 employees, but really a more personal story of the continual reinvention of why we do what we do, the reinvention of our company's mission. And we've come to realize that a mission statement is not just a feel-good sort of blurb at the beginning of an employee handbook, but rather a living, breathing statement that drives us and rallies our team of passionate people to a cause. And I want to tell you kind of how our mission has evolved over our 18 years. So back in 1993, here in the Penn Quarter, before it even had that nickname, it was just kind of a scary place downtown. Jose and our partner Roberto Alvarez and I had a fairly lofty goal. We thought it was a big mission, and that was to introduce Americans and Washingtonians, formerly not really known for being very adventurous diners, in tapas, small plates of Spain, and in a new way of eating, of sharing and kind of celebrating food in a new way. And this brought out some skeptical reactions from our friends, and we heard lots of reasons why we were going to fail. Americans like big portions, and people don't want to share their food, or more ironically, where we are today, nobody will go to that dark, scary neighborhood. In fact, we had some rough times the first couple years. We had one guest stabbed on his way to his car after eating at Jaleo, and we had drug dealers and all kinds of nefarious characters on our block. And so we knew we had to be great to be successful at 7th and E. But luckily, we had some secret weapons. We had 23-year-old José Andrés, with all of his energy and talent. And on the first day of training, my partner Roberto already upped the stakes in what our mission was. And he announced to our staff that our goal was nothing less than to open the best Spanish tapas restaurant in the world. And I kind of raised my hand and said, Roberto, you mean the country, right? Not Spain? He's like, no, Spain too. And I realized at that point, he's right. That's what it's going to be. That's what it's going to take to convince Americans to eat in a new way and to come down to the early Penn Quarter in all of its scary glory. So we persisted and we passionately committed ourselves to this new mission. We got Jaleo up and rolling, and things were going really well. But very early on, we realized that something bigger was happening around our neighborhood. We were starting to serve as many as 500 people in a day. We were working with our neighbors at the Shakespeare Theater and the Landsberg and other early businesses in the Penn Quarter to really change people's minds about not just this little part of DC, but really downtown DC in general. And really starting to create a positive momentum for the first time in 25 years since the '68 riots, which literally left 1,200 buildings in DC burned to the ground. And many of them stayed rubble for much of that 25 years. And we were already learning, looking out our door and seeing that the power of food and that our little restaurant had to maybe transform a neighborhood. And we started to kind of broaden our mission and think about, well, it's not just about creating a restaurant or some great dishes. Our goal and our new mission was really to create an amazing neighborhood and to turn the Penn Quarter into not only one of Washington's best neighborhoods, but really one of the great neighborhoods in the country. And curious people came down and kind of fell in love with our concept. And we started to see really that the power of food had to not only impact what we eat, but to change people's lives. Maybe 2 or 3 years after we opened, another big turning point happened as I walked down E Street and spent some time with my new friend Robert Egger. Hopefully many of you know about DC Central Kitchen and what that Robert founded back in the late 80s and really gathered momentum during this period in the 90s. DC Central Kitchen not only feeds 5,000 people a day in shelters and schools across the city, but they really do much more than that to empower people, empower minds, and change the community. They train formerly homeless people, men and women, for careers in our industry, and really have such an amazing impact in the community, serving food that they've collected, surplus food from restaurants and caterers and hotels, and using that food as a tool to empower people and change their lives. This model's been copied now in like 31 college campuses across the country and countless other institutions around the country and around the world. And Robert really changed our thinking about the meaning of a nonprofit. They even have a for-profit subsidiary that does catering. And we started to realize that social change and what you do to improve your world is not just what you do in your spare time, it's not just a hobby, but it really needs to be part of your core mission as a company. And Robert had a big impact in kind of changing our mission and changing our lives in that way. We both grew as Robert was growing his model across the country. We opened more restaurants in DC, first in the Penn Quarter and then outside in the suburbs in Maryland and Virginia. We took our show on the road to Los Angeles and Las Vegas and started really kind of seeing the impact that our restaurants could have in a hotel or even a hotel casino, and making a big impact from small dishes and small great guest experiences. I think I heard in the introduction a little bit about minibar. Minibar is a creation of José Andrés, where he does the avant-garde cooking inspired by his mentor, Ferran Adrià. And minibar is about new ways of looking at food, questioning what is food, how can food change and impact somebody's lives. And through the experience of minibar and this sort of cooking for the few, the haute cuisine, whether it's Ferran Adrià's El Bulli that has 300,000 requests for 2,000 reservations, or minibar that I know is tough to get into, I apologize. But we realized that cooking for the few, those little unique dishes, and questioning what food can be and what it can mean, may actually lead to how we feed the many. And that lesson really hit home recently, actually. José's been invited to lecture at Harvard in science and cooking, which is really amazing. Here's a guy who dropped out of high school at 14 and now has the title of visiting professor in applied sciences at Harvard University. And really just for his ability to innovate and to look at food, always questioning what can we learn from the past and what can we do new in the future with food. And after his last lecture, we met a couple of scientists from MIT who are actually may end hunger in the next decade. They've figured out a way to manufacture nutritious proteins out of sunlight. And we're talking with these guys and they say, you know, what you do in your restaurants with food inspires us to do what we do. They may not have learned the technology from us, but we realize again that even what happens at minibar or El Bulli can actually have a pretty big effect on the world. What really brought this kind of change in mission together was José's trip in 2010 down to Haiti after the big earthquake. He joined a couple of friends from Spain who had invented a brand new style of solar cooker, more efficient, lightweight, inexpensive, and an incredible way to cook food in either an emergency, time of emergency, or even a time of peace and well, no prosperity. That would have been a bad choice. But José had this life-changing experience and brought that home to all of us at ThinkFoodGroup, seeing not only how emergency food aid, airlifted into the country, could have immediate, obviously you need it for the first few days after a disaster, but long-term that kind of food aid actually can perpetuate hunger, can depress food prices and force farmers off their land and unable to sell what they grow after the cost of food essentially goes to zero with bags of rice dropping from the sky. So he started to question how we're going to reinvent the system to take care of people in areas of emergency and endemic hunger. In Haiti, they have an even more striking crisis, which is the deforestation of their land. 98% of the trees in Haiti have been cut down, and primarily the use of that wood is charcoal for cooking. So the idea of these inexpensive solar ovens, which we took time, and José in his backyard set one up and figured out a better way and a more efficient way to cook nutritious food more quickly. And again, bringing a chef into the discussion of a much larger issues of hunger and the role of food in the world. So we really, at that point, we created our new mission statement to really not just create a great dish or a great restaurant and rethink how we do food service, not only what kind of effect we can have on our communities, but really how can we think about changing the world? And that's our new mission statement, to change the world through the power of food. And since then, we've launched a new nonprofit, which Jose, again, has spearheaded with all the support of our company called World Central Kitchen, to address issues like we learned about in Haiti, and we already have 3 projects identified in Haiti that we're going to take on and get funded. And just last month, Secretary of State Clinton named Jose the culinary ambassador to the Global Initiative for Clean Cook Stoves, which is a UN-sponsored initiative that has, talk about big, hairy, ambitious goals. Their goal is to have 100 million sustainable, safe cooking kitchens installed across the world. 100 million families transformed by 2020. So big, hairy mission, and we're very excited to be part of it. Back here in the Penn Quarter, this kind of thinking led us into a conversation with the National Archives. They approached us about sponsoring their first ever exhibit about food in America and the government's role in what we eat, called What's Cooking Uncle Sam? You can go see the show at the archives across the street. And they approached us about becoming a sponsor, perhaps giving some money or throwing a party. And in the old days, maybe before our new mission, that's what we would have done. But these days, we thought, how can we do something much more? How can we really get involved with this dialogue about what food meant to America in the past and how we're going to learn from our past history in order to make a better future? And especially this year in 2011, when over the next coming 6 months or so, they'll be debating the Farm Bill in Congress and deciding how much of not only our nation, but much of the world is going to eat in the coming 5 to 10 years. So we thought, what a better time rallying our industry. So many people, not just Jose and Rob, but people across the food industry, rallying to these causes and bringing focus and attention and the minds of chefs to the issues of food in our day. And so we decided to close our old Café Atlantico and reopen a historic American restaurant called America Eats Tavern, which is actually a benefit for the Archives Foundation and helping to kind of bring some life and some fun to this discussion. But in the process of working with them, it was really an incredibly educational process and remains that way. Some of the sources of our food issues today, like the obesity crisis. I had no idea that 60 years ago the government thought we had a national security crisis, that our youth were malnourished. They didn't have enough calories to become strong enough to go and fight. And 1/3 of recruits that tried to sign up to go fight in World War II were turned away because they essentially had malnutrition. So the government got involved in a whole bunch of programs, school lunch and farming and so forth, to deliver calories more efficiently to our population. And look how well that worked. 60 years later, we have 66% of Americans either overweight or obese. 1/3 of our kids are overweight or obese. And it's going to take a lot of different efforts to fix this. It's going to take new approaches to farming and obviously new approaches to government and government subsidies. But it's not just about creating fresh, healthy food and providing access to it. It's really reinventing the mindset of Americans about food, how we feed ourselves, how we feed our families, adjusting our palates and so forth. And why not involve chefs and restaurants in this great debate? This time the public is paying attention, and I think it's going to be a very interesting year as these issues are debated here in Washington and the government. So we really have the lesson of Jaleo, of tapas, coming full circle. We need to eat better, but less, greater variety, more healthful foods. And so really out of those maybe little dreams, although the restaurant didn't seem that little at the time, it's pretty scary stuff. But out of those little missions, our big dreams and our big missions grew. And so that's how we reinvented our mission in a very short nutshell. The story of our company, the story of our lives, and the story really of our experience here in the Penn Quarter, about keeping our minds open to these possibilities and not shying away from thinking big. And so I hope that while we're just kind of undertaking this new mission, where it is, there it is, and inspiring ourselves and rallying our teams, our now 800 employees, to this call to do what they can to not only improve our guests' lives and our team members' lives, but to change the world. And I'm hoping that this story has somehow inspired you to look at your own dreams and figure out your own big, hairy, audacious goals and how you can change the world. So thank you.